we go. So I just wanted to welcome everyone to, I think, our third annual Amazing Autumn Outings program. Let me just input my password into Zoom real quick so it will record. There we go. So I'm Mariah. I'm the Community Conservation Manager for the Berkshire Natural Resources Council. I just wanted to share that we are recording this event. That way we can send it out so everyone can enjoy if they missed it. Throughout the event, we would love if you would stay muted. We do appreciate if you want to pop any questions into the chat or raise your hand. I think we have a small enough group. We could, ask some clarifying questions or comments along the way. We do have a dedicated Q&A section at the end, though. And then before moving on, I think I muted myself. My coworkers are here tonight supporting us. Rich Montone, the Director of Fundraising for BNRC, and Charlotte Hood, Volunteer and Outreach Assistant. I think many of you are very familiar with BNRC, but just in case you're not, we are a regional land trust actively working throughout Berkshire County on land conservation, land stewardship, and community engagement. BNRC conserves land to protect water resources and wildlife habitat for climate resilience and to connect people to the natural world. And now I'll pass it over to Charlotte for a land acknowledgement.
Hi everyone, it's great to be with you this afternoon. Land acknowledgement. It is with gratitude and humility that we acknowledge that we are learning, speaking, and gathering on the ancestral homelands of the Monterey people, who are the indigenous peoples of this land. Despite tremendous hardship in being forced from here, today their community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge Munson community. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present, as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. Berkshire Natural Resource Council supports informed research about and respectful interpretation of the history and culture of the indigenous people that have historically inhabited the lands of the present-day Berkshires. We urge others to join us in learning about these important histories, work to understand the culture and lifeways of the Mohican people, and to respect both their true history and their contemporary lives. Thank you. Now I'll pass the mic to Rich.
Thank you. So over the course of the next hour, we're going to think about autumn and we're going to think about the outdoors, and we're going to talk about where to go, what to bring, what to look for when you're on your outdoor adventures. We'll share a few tips about what could make your outings even more fun or even more safe. And, as Mariah said, we'll have a Q&A session at the end, but since we're a relatively small group, you can either put something in the chat or maybe have some back and forth anytime. We'll wrap by 5 o'clock, and so it'll be fun and it'll be quick. Back to you, Mariah.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself. Awesome. So before we get going, I'll just share my screen. Can everyone see that? Awesome. All right. So I want to share with you a little bit about the recipe for brilliant autumn colors. So there are 3 main ingredients: variety of species, so trees and shrubs, the correct or appropriate weather for the right fall colors to come through, and the overall landscape. So I'm sure you're all familiar, but in New England, we have many trees and shrub species that have the potential to turn really vibrant colors. We have our hickories with gold and yellow, American beech that stay on through the winter with the brownish bronze color, white and red oaks that are more reddish brown, big tooth aspens that also turn a little reddish. We have red maples that are yellow to red, sugar maples, which really pop, that's more orange to red, the staghorn sumac, which in some cases to me looks like a rainbow at the right time of year, and hobblebush, among many others that have more purple hue. So let's talk about the ideal weather a little bit. So what you really want is warm, sunny days and cool nights to really favor the vibrant colors. This summer's drought was expected to cause kind of a patchy array of fall color, starting a little bit earlier. I think even in early August, I saw some color changing, but we're definitely starting to see it now towards the end of September creeping in. So I think that the colors are likely to be a little bit more muted, and also not last as long throughout the drought, but we'll likely have some really nice color. Also this spring in New England, you may be familiar that we faced another round of the spongy moth, which with large areas of forest having their leaves desiccated. In most cases, the leaves did grow back, but it could definitely have some impact on leaves in some areas. So next we'll talk about the ideal landscape. So large landscapes that have an interesting blend of deciduous and coniferous or evergreen trees and topographic features. So just think of the Berkshires with hills and mountains and valleys and really large tracts of undeveloped and protected forest. A little tidbit on why leaves change. There's a chemical process that's taking place in the tree as the seasons change from summer to winter. The spring and summer leaves are photosynthesizing, which are just factories where most of the food for the tree's growth is being manufactured. And in the fall, the changes in the length of daylight and temperature causes the leaves to drop their food making process. So the chlorophyll breaks down, the green color disappears, and the other pigments become visible. A lot of cool science going on in the colors that we are really interested in. All right, so I believe next we're going to talk about where to go.
Thanks, Mariah. So we're going to start by sharing some reserves with exciting new improvements and additions. And first up is Thomas and Palmer Brook in Great Barrington, which really has all the ingredients for an amazing autumn outing. We recently opened a wonderful new trail on this 270-acre reserve, but I'll start off with the existing trail, which is just as wonderful, the Meadow Loop Trail. The Meadow Loop is a half a mile of accessible trail that, as its name suggests, is surrounded by a sweeping meadow of goldenrod and aster, both of which are blooming around this time of year. They probably have a couple more weeks left. They're definitely on the tail end of things, but still some time to see those. And this idyllic scene is complemented by a wetland complex and a view to the pond in the distance. It looks like,
Charlotte?
yeah.
Yeah, I think folks are having a little trouble hearing you. I'm not quite sure.
How about I try and disconnect from my Bluetooth and just go through the other speaker?
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
That's the only thing I can think of. Oh, right, I'm disconnected from my Bluetooth. How do I sound? Asking the audience mostly.
I can hear you okay. Can folks input into the chat if it's better for them?
Testing.
Little better, says Al. So I think we'll go with this. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. So, where was I? Wetland complex and small pond in the distance, and then there are these large sugar maples which stand out because the rest of the environment is a pasture field and characteristic of pasture trees. They're really big, have a broad canopy and great colors throughout this time of year. You can take a seat on a bench beneath one of those trees and admire the views of 3 Mile Hill in the background, which you can see in this lower right-hand picture. Really, yeah, the ideal hillside background with that blend of coniferous and deciduous trees. So now I'm going to the next slide. There's a big new whale rock trail named for this really unique geologic feature on the right-hand side that looks kind of like the spine of a whale. It's a 2 mile out and back hike, designed and constructed by BNRC, and with support from volunteers, greenagers, and the Student Conservation Association. It's really obvious that a lot of care went into this trail to give users the best experience possible. So I really recommend checking it out. And especially at this time of year, it climbs through a forest of chestnut oak, birch, and cherry trees to this unique rock feature as the destination point. It is important to note that spongy moth had an impact on this area. So fingers crossed the trees were able to recuperate and it doesn't affect the fall foliage too much. I'll also mention that an exciting event is set to take place in November, showcasing the new trail and new resources on accessible trails. Mariah has just put the link to sign up or register in the chat, and this is sure to be a fun and celebratory community gathering, and I'd love to see some of you there. Now I will pass it on to Mariah.
Thanks, Charlotte. All right, so the next reserve we're going to talk about is Steepletop. It's in New Marlborough. It is currently BNRC's largest reserve that the organization owns and cares for at a little over 1,200 acres. It is a favorite by many, pretty remote reserve, well worth the visit down to New Marlborough. So if you'll find, when you get there, you'll find 5 miles of marked trail. There's kind of a north loop and a south loop of trails, pretty gradual grade all around. And there's tons more miles of unmarked woods roads if you're prepared to adventure in that capacity. There's a variety of habitats, wetlands, small meadows, some really old forest and some younger forest. We have the black cherry trees, sugar maple, red maple, northern red oak, birch, white pine, and hemlock. Basically anything you would expect to see in a New England forest. This past summer, we had an incredible seasonal stewardship crew led by Josh Hopmans, our property manager, who worked on repairing the bridge on the North Loop, which is Louise Lane. As you can see here, the repaired bridge looks absolutely incredible and will be very sturdy, and your feet will not get wet when crossing. The other addition is some added bog bridging. There's been ongoing beaver activity along this section of trail as well. And so the bog bridging will help, you know, in those wet seasons, keep your feet dry. I'm sure some of you on here have maybe walked through that with a foot of water in the past. So it'll be a good experience for you next time you go. All right, so next we have, I think, Rich.
Basin Pond. Yeah, over in Lee, in terms of new and improved, we have Basin Pond. Basin Pond, as you may know, is about 300 acres, and it offers 2.5 miles of trail. What's improved here is near the beginning of the trail, there have been these 2 tricky stream crossings over large rocks that are in the water. And, you know, this has been true since the trail was initially built. So these crossings, along with a place further along up the trail, have been in the process of being upgraded to bridges, which is going to open this reserve up for many more people to be able to use it, because anybody with the slightest bit of, you know, not moving as well as maybe they once did, it was really tough to get across the stream crossing. So that's going to be much easier than it was before. And it's going to enable people to enjoy this reserve, which is really a great one. There are very cool rock features along this route. So if you're into, you know, New England rocks, this is a great place to go. There's a wonderful overlook platform where you can have a rest and you can check out the beaver wetland. And this reserve also abuts the October Mountain State Forest, which is the largest state forest in Massachusetts at 16,500 acres. So Basin Pond, great place to check out in the autumn. I think next up, we're going on to our classic BNRC autumn outing.
Awesome. I just saw a question come in from Al. When will the bridges be completed? Our trail crew is out there right now. I would imagine, let's see, probably end of October, I would say. Do either of you have a better time estimate?
I never want to promise anything on behalf of the trail crew, because I know that they're always working diligently, but they are also subject to the elements. And so like things can happen like a really wet week, and that can make a delay that was unanticipated. So I know it's hoped for by the end of October, but if you don't quite see that in action, be forgiving, because we don't make the weather.
That's fair. Charlotte will be helping to lead a volunteer workday next week to put to bring the material out for the actual decking on the bridge, which you can see it is needed as a next step. Thank you. All right, so on to autumn classics.
All right, so I did change the settings on my audio to aggressively cancel any echo. I hope that helps. So our autumn classics, these are places that are well known and well loved. Perhaps you've been to one or two of them. We'll start with the Hoosac Range in North Adams, which is a very large preserve of nearly 1,000 acres. There are over 6 miles of trail that range from easy to difficult, or moderate to difficult. And there's a relatively short route to Sunset Rock. It's up 1.5 miles round trip, and it offers expansive views of the Green Mountains, hopefully more like the orange and red mountains around this time of year, and Taconic Range. And then, as my guess, it's also a great place to watch the sunset, of course, and enjoy views of the changing season. A longer hike up to Spruce Hill offers a spectacular view. If it's a clear day, you're likely to see Mount Greylock at nearly 2,600 feet. I think it's the tallest BNRC reserve. And be aware that it has wintry very early up there, so plan for that. I'm still seeing that it's hard for people to hear me, and I would hate for people to not get this information. What do you think, Mariah?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take over if that's helpful, Charlotte, in your pieces. But I think if you maybe try to talk a little louder, it could be helpful. I feel like someone mentioned it's kind of a reverberation going on, but just, yeah, we'll see if that helps.
I'll finish this up. So if you visit around now, you may be lucky enough to view petals or groups of migratory raptors, which is a really special sight. And lastly, I am leading a hike up to Sunset Rock this weekend. Actually, we have room, and I'd love to see you there. And you can sign up using the link that Mariah just put in the chat. And I'm going to pass it to Mariah.
Thank you. All right, so the next autumn classic is kind of a lot of offerings wrapped into one. It is the High Road section on Yukon Ridge and connecting trails. For those of you who aren't familiar, the High Road is a long-term recreation initiative fueled by BNRC supporters and conservation partners to work to establish a network of trails and conservation land throughout the Berkshires. So BNRC and its partners opened the very first segment of the High Road in 2021, which encompasses an 8-mile connected and signed path along Yukon Ridge from Pittsfield to Stockbridge. So the access points on the High Road Yukon Ridge really focus on Bosque Mountain, which gives you access to Mahana Cobble in the north. The Mahana Cobble Reserve is owned and cared for by BNRC. About 222 acres, 2.8-mile trail out and back in total. There's some incredible shagbark hickories at the top, so for hickory nut collecting, but also some good golden color. And at George's Bench, which is at the vista at the top of Mahana Cobble, you get uninterrupted views over Kennedy Park and south into Yukon Ridge and Pleasant Valley Wildlife Sanctuary. It may be one of the only views in this area where you see no development at all. It's a pretty difficult hike, I will say, because the first section you are climbing up a ski slope. BNRC's trail crew and partners have done a pretty good job at making it a little easier on hikers to navigate rather than just going straight up the ski slope. There is some woodland opportunity, but it is signed and blazed the whole way. There's a kiosk at Bosque Mountain and trail maps that you can pick up there. And then if you did just an out and back trail, your approach back down the mountain would give you a bird's eye view of Pittsfield and the North Berkshires, seeing all the way to Mount Greylock on a clear day. If you did want to continue on the trail, you would arrive onto Mass Audubon's Pleasant Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, heading to Yukon Seat first for a great view looking west, and then to Lennox Mountain, which also has a great view looking west. You'd be looking out over the Richmond Valley and the Taconics. From there, you can head down to Pleasant Valley Wildlife Sanctuary via the Overbrook Trail and following signage there. Or you can continue on to BNRC's Yukon Ridge South Reserve through Lennox Watershed Land. And that reserve is home to the very popular Olivia's Overlook, also the Burbank Trail, the Charcoal Trail, and the Brothers Trail, and also Old Bald Head Road. So a lot of trails within the Yukon Ridge South Reserve. It's 734 acres. Monk's Pond is there as well. 6 miles of interconnected trails that are more on the moderate side, with parking actually at that reserve too, if you wanted to just touch on the southern section of the trail. And incredible views, even from the parking lot, you can see the Stockbridge Bowl, so very worth a visit. One of my favorite things to see on the Burbank Loop in particular is witch hazel, which actually blooms in the fall. That's pretty fun to see. And that is the High Road Yukon Ridge.
There we go. So next up is Parsons Marsh. Parsons Marsh is not far from the Yukon Ridge South Olivia's Overlook Reserve on Undermountain Road in Lennox. This spot is 183 acres. It has a 1/3 of a mile trail one way. It's an out and back trail. So if you do the trail and then come back to the parking area, that's 2/3 of a mile. And it's an accessible trail and boardwalk. So it's a hard pack and then a boardwalk out over the wetlands so that you can go to an observation area and look over Parsons Marsh. It makes it a great place for people who want an easy flat hike, or people who are using strollers or walkers or wheelchairs or anything like that. It's a great place for this. It's also a really great reserve to use for a number of different purposes. There's a picnic table there, so you could bring a lunch and you could enjoy a lunch at the picnic table near the small pond that's right before the boardwalk starts. It's a place where you can get a very quick walk in if you're looking for a quick walk. So a lot of different things that you can do here. If there's a pollinator garden there, there's white pine and cottonwood, big tooth aspen, yellow birch. So lots of different stuff going on at Parsons Marsh. There is a spice bush and dogwood wetland and around the wetland. And this is also a place I know where I see a lot of people who love to do birding. This is a place where they go. I always see people at the observation deck out on the marsh with their binoculars. So these are great things to do at Parsons Marsh and really close to Lennox Village. I think Bob's Way is up next, right?
Yes, thank you, Rich. I might try turning off my camera and see if that helps things. Let me know if it doesn't. So Bob's Way is in Monterey. It's 260 acres, 2.5 miles of loop trails, about moderate difficulty. And it's really highlighted by this beautiful beaver pond that you see in this photo, and also a wetland. I personally love bodies of water this time of year because of how they reflect the colorful trees And the beavers are also really busy around this time of year preparing for winter. So if you're lucky enough to see one, that's a real treat. If you don't see one, you'll certainly see evidence of that. At Bob's Way, there's also a ton of large oak and beech trees. I've been told that it rains acorns there, so just a heads up to watch out. And as of a couple weeks ago, Bob's Way is also bursting with fungi, all shapes and colors, especially with the volatile rain that's happened. So I really recommend it. And all in all, this is just a lovely and remote reserve, ideal for observing the changing of seasons and wildlife. Next is Mariah.
All right, so next is a well-known reserve called Hollow Fields in Richmond. It's about 670 acres with some incredible views, a really expansive view of Yoakum Ridge. You just start climbing an elevation in about 40 acres of wide open field. And before you know it, you've climbed a lot and you can turn around and you have basically a vista. There are 5 miles of trails. I'm not sure if I mentioned that already, but there's the general loop trail through the field, but there's also a trail that opened last year called the Perry's Peak Loop that brings you up into the woodland to another great vista. I think most frequently known as the Richmond Overlook. Gets you some great view. I'm not sure that you can see development from that one either, now that I think about it. So pretty good options there. I will add, this is an incredibly popular trailhead and can often have really full parking lot at really popular times. So we do ask that maybe if you're planning to go to Hollow Fields, you have another close option in mind, because we are not allowed to park on the road. The BNRC Berkshire Trails app is free, and I think you'll hear a little bit more about that later, but could be a good alternative for finding trails, not only BNRC trails, but other partner trails throughout the county.
And so next up is Alfred Springs, which, if you've not been to it, is this awesome big woods reserve in Alfred, obviously. And if you're going there for the first time, it's the kind of place where, as you're going there, you might be thinking to yourself, did I go too far? Am I going to the wrong place? But if you just sort of trust and persevere, you'll see 2 of the parking areas are near the southern end of the property. And those are the places where you might be like, am I going to the right place? But you'll get there. And then the other parking area is in a very different location along that ridge line on a different road. It's called the Saddle Trail parking area. And that one is much easier to find. But anyways, Alfred Springs is 899 acres of big woods. There's a great contrast of forest types. It's great for fall colors. You're going to see white pine and hemlock stands mixed in with other northern hardwoods like sugar maple and white ash and yellow birch and beech and cherry and red oak. It's just amazing. Big woods, I love it, if you can't tell. There's 7 miles of trails, and as I mentioned, there are 3 trailheads. The trails range from moderate to difficult. There are some places that go up pretty quickly in terms of elevation gain. If you're able to muster that on the Father Loop Trail, you're going to get up to an area where on clear days, you can see the summit of Greylock Mountain. So just terrific stuff happening at Alfred Springs. So you have views of Mount Greylock, you have views of the Tom Ball Mountain Range along these trails as well, and views of the Taconic Range too. Alfred Springs, it's I'm not supposed to have favorites, but it might be my favorite. So if you haven't been there, I highly recommend that you check it out.
All right, I have this silly headset on now, so it better make a difference. Yay! Great. Okay, so on to the Old Mill Trail, definitely a favorite for me. It's 127 acres along the east branch of the Housatonic River. This is thankfully an uncontaminated section, so fishing and playing, dipping is encouraged. There are 3 miles of trail, a lot of which is cut through the bank of the river, making it a really special experience. There's a lot of red from maple and dogwood, and of course the gorgeous hue of hobblebush, the purple color of hobblebush. And you'll also likely find evidence of fall wildflowers such as aster and goldenrod, and the fruiting bodies of jack in the pulpit, blue cohosh, all sorts of special wildflowers there in spring and fall and summer, of course. There's also BNRC's fall self-guided naturalist series up right now at the Old Mill Trail, and this installation talks about what's happening in the natural world and prompts you to take a closer look at your surroundings. So great time to visit the Old Mill Trail. Next, we're going to the less trodden reserves. And we're starting with Steadmand Pond in Monterey, which is close to Bob's Way, actually. I recommend pairing the two since Steadmand Pond is relatively small or short walk. The whole preserve is very large, 800 acres, but there aren't a lot of hiking options. Currently, it's just a 0.2 of a mile walk to the pond, but it really is worth it. It's very picturesque with fields full of goldenrod and aster, with a great steep sloped hill in the background, which is especially beautiful around this time of year, as you can see in this photo. It's a great place to just sit and observe. There's beaver activity, migrating birds this time of year. If you fish, it's a wonderful spot. And again, yeah, if you want to get more steps in, you can go to Bob's Way, just 10 minutes down the road. So I think
Awesome.
that's actually the last reserve. I will.
We've got two more actually, but that's totally fine.
My
Before
last
moving
one.
on, yeah, I just want to address, someone asked about our dog policy. So I just wanted to pass that along real quick. So BNRC does allow dogs on its trails. We do ask that they're on leash or fully under your control, and the local town leash laws do apply, though they can sometimes be difficult to find. So going on the leash or fully under your control, we ask that you keep your dog from running up or jumping on other people and away from animal habitats like fields, in particular during grassland nesting bird season and wetlands to protect amphibians. We ask that you bring a bag and remove their waste. And please note that I think only one BNRC trailhead has a trash can, and that's Housatonic Flat. So please take your dog's waste with you when you leave. All right, so then we will move on. Most people don't know that amongst BNRC reserves is an island in Hinsdale called Ashmere Island. It's a 7-acre island reserve on the northern section of Ashmere Lake. It's about a 45-minute paddle, and you have to go underneath the causeway, which is less scary than it sounds. You'd have to gain a little bit of speed, but I would say at a max it may be 15 feet and wide enough that you can sort of push yourself along on the side if you didn't get enough speed heading into it. There's a public boat launch at Ashmere State Forest, and on the northern section of the island, there's a kind of a pull-in area where you could hop out and go swimming in summertime, or at this time of year, take in the scenery and have a lunch break or something like that. So yeah, very great colors accessed from the pond. All right, and I'll just address some of the questions. I'm going to save the Tomball question for later, but the Basin Pond website, I see it is mentioned that it is tragic, beautiful dam site. It is not a typo. There is a story there. From my understanding, there were multiple attempts to create a housing development on Basin Pond. I'm forgetting the actual years, I believe throughout the 1900s, and the dam in both cases, in both attempts to create these housing developments was breached and ended up in some deaths, but certainly other like loss of housing and things like that downstream. So right now, if you visit Basin Pond, it is just an earthen dam. It's always been an earthen dam. It remains breached, but the pond is now maintained by beavers. All right, so we'll continue on. Widow White.
All right. So for the less trod, our last reserve to tell you about is Widow White, which is a dense canopy of northern hardwoods and rocky outcrops. Widow White is 270 acres in size, and this is a place where there are no marked trails, but a bunch of wood roads going around the property. There are some BNRC folks who, and when I say BNRC folks, I mean everyone who visits the reserves. Some folks who come out for BNRC reserves actually prefer properties that don't have blazing, don't have marked trails. And if you are one of those people, this is a place that you should check out this fall. Yeah, we'll get to the tomball questions for sure. We won't let that go by without answering that. Oh, you want me to speak to the tomball questions? I'm sorry. Thank you for that. So I'm going to ask you about your other favorites before we do that. I see in the message queue here, Mariah's like, can you speak to the tomball questions? So yes, what I'll say about the tomball questions, I don't want to say about a year from now, we hope there will be public access to tomball, because I don't want you to necessarily pin October 2023 as the exact date. But there are a number of ways where BNRC is working toward creating public access to Tomball Mountain in several different locations. And we're feeling very optimistic about conversations with neighbors and with permitting processes and things of this sort. And so I expect within, I would hope by next spring, summer, there will be like legitimate public news about how this is going to take shape and happen. And then I would hope that the public access doesn't happen too long after that. So that's my attempt at trying to give you something while still being a little bit vague, because some of the conditionals have not yet settled. And I just don't want to tell you something that we don't fully know yet. So in terms of other favorites, Al has popped in Clam River, which is a great place to check out. It's a magical place. It's many people's favorite BNRC reserve, and many people especially swoon about its Hammertown Road Trail. So that's Clam River. Anybody else have other favorites? You can pop in the chat. And Diane, Tomball Mountain is located, it pretty much runs exactly north-south, and it kind of starts just above Division Street in Great Barrington. It's very close to where Division Street and Alford Road come together in Great Barrington, just to the west of Long Pond. And then it goes north up into Alford, up and touches part of West Stockbridge, and basically comes down at Cobb Road in West Stockbridge in a north-south way. Clam River is in Sandisfield. And you can find any, let's see, if you go to this website, bnrc.org/reserves, you can find any of the BNRC properties at that link. So there's over 56 BNRC reserves to explore. Thank you to donors for making this possible, because BNRC is donor funded. There's really no substantial revenue for BNRC outside of donations. So if donors are not making the gifts, then all of the conservation and the wildlife and habitat protection and the farm preservation and the support of farmers and this free public access to the outdoors in the Berkshires, it just doesn't happen. So donors are an essential part of the BNRC team, as are the volunteers, because there's over 200 volunteers. And if there weren't volunteers helping the BNRC staff take care of and monitor these properties, we'd be totally sunk. It's just too much land for the staff to manage alone. So thank you to the volunteers as well. And then we have bnrc.org/learn, where you can check out some field guides and books. links to apps and websites and documentaries. There are regional and county maps for purchase if you like a paper map. There's a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging resources with regard to being outdoors in Berkshire. And of course, the BNRC Trails app is free, also thanks to donors. And that's something that you can download and find all of the BNRC properties on a tappable map right on your phone. There's a good example of it on the screen. So thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah.
So we're just going to quickly run through some essentials of what maybe to bring on your autumn outing. The day pack is essential. Water, of course, we recommend 2 liters. Food, sturdy footwear, multiple layers. You never know. There've been some really cold days recently, and I'd much rather be able to undress than be chilly. Map and compass certainly can't steer you wrong. Let's see, first aid kit, cannot emphasize that enough. You got to be prepared. In our follow-up materials, we'll have a list of basic first aid kit contents. And blaze orange, someone mentioned hunting. So all BNRC reserves except for Parsons Marsh and the Roosevelt are open to hunting as it relates to Mass state regulations. So I believe we are in black bear hunting season right now. I think for hikers, primarily really the October to December, when it's shotgun season for white-tailed deer, is when you really want to wear your blaze orange, both for yourself and for your dog. I highly recommend not just wearing a blaze orange vest, but a hat if you can as well, just because if you're wearing a vest and a backpack, that kind of minimizes your blaze orange. I will say the hunting community is incredibly educated about the location of trails and trail safety in terms of, you know, where a lot of people are, but just the due diligence for being outside during hunting season. In Massachusetts, hunting is not allowed on Sundays, so that's a good thing to keep in mind. And if you are uncomfortable hiking in hunting season, there are a number of different organizations that don't allow hunting, Mass Audubon being one. I'm not sure others in the Berkshires in particular, but Pleasant Valley would be a really good place to go visit during hunting season. Trekking poles, also super helpful. I think I've read that if you're using trekking poles, maybe 30% of the weight on your legs gets transferred up to your arms. So building strength in both areas and not putting as much stress on your knees. And some of the handy additional items, you know, your mobile device, your favorite app. You know, many of us use iNaturalist and Seek and all sorts of other fun apps for identifying things. The eBird app, the Merlin Bird ID app, all good ones. Your camera, binoculars, field guides, journal, your dog, handy additional item, among many other things, I am sure. All right, in the event of making sure we get out on time, I'm going to pass it over to Charlotte for what to look for.
All right. So the most exciting aspect of this, in my opinion, I've already talked about a good amount of the things you see here. We have aster, that's the bright purple flower. I think this is the New York aster, and then we have the goldenrod. Mariah has mentioned another late blooming plant is witch hazel. It can bloom as late as November. A really interesting plant here, ghost pipe, and of course scat. As always, does anyone have a guess as to what animal the scat came from in the left corner? You can enter in the chat or raise your hand. I don't see any answers. All right, I'll give it away. It's coyote scat, most likely. Oh, yes, we got a correct answer from Brandon. Great. It's also deer mating season, porcupine mating season as well, but deers do this behavior where they rub their antlers. Male deer, bucks, rub their antlers on trees, like mostly saplings and shrubs, because the bark is easier to pierce through. This is a territorial signal. And migrating birds, of course, it's the fall. So that was quick and dirty overview. There's obviously so much more in the natural world to look for, but I want to make time for questions.
Thank you, Charlotte. I just want to note I put a plug into the hunting season calendar into the chat, and we'll send that as a follow-up as well. So at this time, I know we've had some questions throughout the program, but I would invite you to raise your hand, just unmute. We've got a small enough crowd that we can keep it pretty casual. Turn your video on if you want. Any questions?
Could we come out of the presentation so we can
yes.
see everyone?
I'm sorry, I have two screens, so
Yeah, no problem.
it's easy for me to see. All right. I think Al mentioned Indigenous Peoples Day in the very beginning. So I wanted to plug in a link to an organization called the Alliance for a Viable Future is partnering with a number of other organizations in the Berkshires to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. And that's going to be happening from October 8th through 10th with a number of different activities online and in person. So I invite you all to check that out. Right, and I do see a question from Jenny. Hi, Jenny. What is the current status with Hollow Fields? I'm happy to dive in, and Rich and Charlotte, if you have anything else to add. Currently, there is no restriction on the time that you can visit Hollow Fields. It is open dawn to dusk. And that is all I know. Rich, do you have anything else to add?
No, that's the current status. So that's where we're at right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Some of you are saying you can't unmute. I will say we transferred over our Zoom account to a business account, so I'm not as familiar with I'll try to ask you to unmute.
It just worked.
Oh, great. All right.
And this is Al. I wanted to know if the area where you're building the new bridge is walkable around it, or is the trail closed?
Hikers are still heading out to Basin Pond. If you go probably anytime between 8:30 and 3:30, you'll probably run into our trail crew out there. I imagine they have some signage if it wasn't safe to cross. I know they've been seeing traffic the whole time they've been out there. So you can definitely still hike the trail. It is not closed. The one question was, can you cross the bridge that they're building right now? And I doubt that's okay, just in case something's not secure. But you can certainly, if you're able, navigate around the rocks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Al, I'm happy to follow up with more information too. If you want to shoot me an email, you can find out more.
Diane, are you off mute now?
Yes. And my question is back to Parsons Marsh. Is there any plan to put in a marked trail in the woodland area before you make the left to get onto the boardwalk?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Diane. For those of you who aren't familiar, prior to the Parsons Marsh boardwalk and trail being created, there was an existing Woods Road loop trail that we utilized to take folks out to sort of see what the process would be like, the kind of, I guess, get a preview of what the trail would give access to. And so within that time, I think it kind of got well established by a lot of visitors. I do think a volunteer a while ago flagged the trail. Jenny, I believe it was Jenny Akabani who's on this call, but as of right now, I don't know that it is a high priority to make that trail official at this time. But again, that's something I could check in with the stewardship department about and get back with you.
But you're saying you believe it is marked. So I've gone out on it and then all of a sudden it disappears and I don't really know where to go.
I thought it's been years ago. I do think there was some flagging that was put out there. It was by no means of on the level of trail signage that we have at other marked trails. So I would caution against, visiting out there without, knowing where you're going
Right.
at this time.
And I just want to say to Charlotte, putting the headphones on did the trick.
I'm glad.
I think I saw Levon's hand first, and then we'll go to Paula. Thank you. Oh, let's see if I can get you to unmute. I don't know why it's doing that. Did that work?
Yes,
There we go.
that worked. Hi, thank you very much, Mariah. My question has to do with the priorities currently that all the various trails in terms of volunteer work. In other words, if a person says, I'd like to volunteer, what do you have a sense of where work is most needed? Just curious. I mean, I know as many of those trails as I can get to. Now that I'm retired, though, I'd like to do more. I'd like to do them all. But so where do volunteers go, and where are we most needed right now?
Absolutely. Charlotte, do you want to answer this one?
Sure. We have a fairly structured system of onboarding volunteers and prioritizing projects. So we encourage people to reach out to us if they're interested in volunteering and telling us what area they're particularly interested in. And if we don't have an upcoming work day that speaks to that interest, then we might be able to find you a more specific project. But generally, we have about, correct me if I'm wrong, Mariah, but like 10 work days per on season. So summer, spring, and fall. And all of those work days will address a priority from on the trail side of things. So does that answer your question?
Oh,
Okay.
she can't meet again. I'm so sorry. I will just add to that Charlotte and I work really closely with our stewardship team to establish those priorities for work days. And I'll just put a plug in for Charlotte's work to really broaden our volunteer offerings. So there are opportunities to join our stewardship team, which is what she was describing as a volunteer. There's also trail steward opportunities if we have a need that's sort of based on what the need is, where you kind of keep our eyes and ears on the trail essentially. And then there are community science volunteer opportunities that Charlotte created this year and are going really well. So if you're at all interested in learning more, feel free to shoot us an email and we'll get you all the information you need.
I can see that. That's wonderful. You're definitely eager to involve volunteers and making it easy for all of us. That's super. All right. Thank you.
So I see Paula, and then Diane, I'll let you go next and I will go ahead and.
Okay, so I have a couple of things. One is, I just did my first volunteer day yesterday. It was great. We worked really hard. I met really great people. It was tremendous. So I can't thank you enough for letting me help you. Charlotte, did you just say that there is a science something?
Yeah, so community science, it's basically research that involves or necessitates the broader public's involvement. So we have two community science opportunities that one of which is pretty seasonal, and it's through Cornell's Lab of Ornithology. It starts in April and continues through August. And you could reach out to me with, and I can give you more information. And then we're launching another year-long opportunity this spring that also has to do with birding. There are some other less formal resources that we can provide you where, like also through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, you can get an app and record what birds you're seeing. And iNaturalist, you can also just take photos of plants and it uploads to a database. So there are a lot of less formal tools that you can use on your own.
I would like more information about that. So if you would kindly send it, that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
There's a technical thing. I have not been able to chat. Don't know why or what happened. I was able to earlier. So it's just a little technical thing. Now here's my back to trails. The question is, I was up on Yoakum Ridge a couple days ago, and we came back down towards Olivia's Overlook and went on I think it's more of the southerly route back to Olivia's Overlook, and it was that Bald Head Trail.
Old Bald Head Road, perhaps?
Yes, and that brought us out to Monk's Pond. I've been to Monk's Pond in the past, but from the other side of it.
Mhm.
And I wasn't able to find the name of that trail. Is that a BNRC property?
It is. I think you might be
Yes.
referring to the Burbank Trail. I'm going to try and pull up the map real quick, but the Burbank Trail is a loop trail that the lower end of that loop would bring you to Monk's Pond and a
Yes.
connection to Old Bald Head. I don't know if you're able to see my screen right there.
Me.
It might be too small. Let's see if I can
Yep.
make it a little bigger. All right, so here's Olivia's Overlook.
Right.
And I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's Monk's Pond.
Yep.
This orange route with the dotted white line is the High Road route, but it's also Old Bald Head Road. And then this green, dark green loop is the Burbank Trail. So as you can see, they do connect right here at Monk's Pond.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
So
where you.
several years ago, I came down along the brook there, and there are some amazing views of that brook. Goes down to a bit of a gully, water is crashing down the rocks, and it's just breathtaking. And so is that the high road that you pointed out with the orange?
Yeah, Old Bald
is
Head
now?
Road is the official high road route through the Yoakum Ridge South Reserve because
That
it
was
gets, yeah.
spectacular.
Oh, good. That's wonderful.
Absolutely spectacular.
I often see a lot of pileated woodpeckers on that stretch, so it's very special.
Okay, well, I'm anxious to go back up there. That was a nice find.
All right, Diane, I see you
The
unmuted.
only comment I wanted to make, and I see Levon is gone already, but I'm on some sort of a list that tells me these are the volunteer opportunities coming forward. So I would assume she should be put on that list, and that will allow her to pick out what she wants to do.
Yes, Diane has been volunteering with BNRC for a long, long time.
A long time.
I think you predated our official onboarding process.
Oh,
You're just on the list.
May I say, I looked for the list of opportunities. I bumped into it almost by mistake one few weeks ago. And then when I went back to look for it, I really couldn't find it. So I had to ask Charlotte specifically to send me the link. So just a little user, a little UX issue there to make it more accessible.
Absolutely. We are in the process of transitioning to a volunteer management software that we'll be sharing with the entire volunteer community, and so it will support a lot of user friendliness and the reporting side on our side. So keep an eye out for that.
Will do.
Awesome. Thanks, Paula. All right, so we're at 5:01. I'll just put out a call for any other questions, comments. We are so thankful. Oh yeah, go ahead, Paula.
Just saying, this was great. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. We're so glad to hear it. And we'll send out the recording along with some resources that we talked about, and just really appreciate your time here with us today.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Have a great autumn. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.